Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of the Kolpack and Izzo Podcast, brought to you by Gate City Bank. With Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo, as we sit here 10 days out before the North Dakota State football opener, with Youngstown State practice into its third week. Spring ball is here. We've already had our first postponement of a game in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, so football season is here. Jeffrey, I'm curious if the intensity will, for the fans, is it here? Will it pick up by the time we get to game day next week?
Well, I think it's going to be there for the team. That's a given. I mean, these guys have gone a long time without playing, and I think that's the one vibe we've gotten from our Zoom meetings with these guys, that it's time to quit working out and practicing and start hitting somebody from another jersey rather than green and yellow. So but the fans, that's a great question. I don't think so. Without tailgating, Dom, it's going to be tough for a lot of these fans to really embrace the whole event.
How many times have we said that, there are plenty of fans that just go to tailgate and don't go to the actual game?
There's thousands.
Yeah.
There's thousands.
That's the part that's really intriguing to me without that there.
And now, I mean, it's not like you can still park there, but you can't sit around and have a cocktail or two, and there's going to be no RVs. So I'm curious, okay, where are they going to be at? You can't have them on campus property or the Fargo Dome parking lot.
Across the street on 19th there?
If I had a house across the street from the Dome, I would be, okay, how much do you want to pay me to park your motorhome or to park your bus?
I was going to say, the Air Museum going to start jacking up prices for their parking lot?
It'd be a great fundraiser.
Yeah,
Why not?
I guess.
I mean, they have a great fundraiser every year, and they're always looking to add additional funds because it's a volunteer organization. Yeah. Oh, it would be an outstanding fundraiser for them.
Just from the interactions you've had with your friends, are they excited about Bison football? Have you heard that?
No,
I haven't either.
Not really. No, maybe it's a reality thing. Once next week hits around and it's game day, that maybe things will change.
I don't think so. I think with the amount of stuff that is happening at this time of year. Normally, parents are busy now with if it's youth hockey or youth basketball, that February and March are not set aside for football games. I don't believe so.
Let me ask you this question. It's 50% capacity, correct? Mm-hmm. Do you think they will reach 50%?
No. I think I said 5 or 6. I think they'd be good to get. I'm going to stick with that
to start.
Yeah, for this game against Youngstown.
Now more and more people are getting their shots. It's now 10% of the North Dakota population, and growing every day. There's several others who probably feel they have the antibodies. They've already had it.
And to this point, UND hockey is hosting this weekend, and Brad Schlossman reported that they are near sellout and it's 3,000 for their games, but that's a marked increase from the first time they were home. Now, they dropped the ticket prices, too, I think about $20, but there are definitely more people willing to come out now than there were just about 3 weeks ago.
That's an interesting thought, too. Doug Burgum was on his press conference yesterday touting the numbers being down. You got to keep the mask mandate, I think, for games and things like that, but I think it'll be a gradual climb.
So that was my next point. So NDSU is off for 2 weeks or away from home 2 weeks after that. I think for that March 13th game with Illinois State, that's when I'm interested to see what the attendance level will be for that game after then 3 weeks from that first game.
So far in the area, I believe people 65 and older have been eligible for an essential workers.
Vaccine,
for the vaccine. So why not? Hey, if you're 65 and older, you got it. Go to the game. Why not?
Yeah, if they want to go, and that's the part will be
essential workers.
Yep.
Give $10 off a ticket for essential workers.
Like we saw at the Super Bowl, there were 7,500 that were at the marketing department, right? Yeah, they'll give you a call right after this podcast. This podcast drops. Where do you want to start this week? We have plenty of happening here. Where do you want to go? Either Vieg's getting a head coaching job, or
hold on here, buddy boy. Let's start with your assumption that the state of hockey is no longer the state of hockey in Minnesota.
Yeah. It isn't.
It's a state of basketball.
It is.
And women's basketball.
I think so. I made that point on my commentary on WDAY on Wednesday night. You can check it out at inforum.com. I think I'm probably late to this, Kolpack. The amount of really, really good basketball players. The best one right now in the country is a Twin Cities native, and Paige Beckers. It's getting only better.
Maybe basketball on its whole is more popular because hockey just doesn't have the numbers that basketball does. I'll give you that. But taking the state of hockey moniker out of the state of Minnesota, Dom, how boring. That is so boring of you. That's like going into Jerry Jones's office and saying you're no longer America's team.
They haven't been America's team for 25 years.
It's like taking the air out of Jordan.
They haven't been America's team
for
a long time.
You know what? That's like telling the Yankees you can no longer wear pinstripes.
I don't even go there. Hockey is such a.
It's been the state of hockey.
I know, but I'm telling you, they're better. More people care about basketball. More people watch basketball, and I think look at right now, the number one recruit in the country is a Minnesotan. Chet Holmgren is the number one. Another Minnesotan.
What about all the NHL players from the state of Minnesota?
That's great. They should brag about that. But look at the fact that Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, all of them are coming to Minnesota right now. That's never happened before over the last couple of years. They want to get into the Twin Cities. It's remarkable to me.
It's just such a boring statement on your part to take the state of how many. There's so many basketball states out there. Indiana although that's starting to wonder about that.
Indiana's gone down.
But what state of hockey? What is it, maybe Massachusetts? Michigan maybe?
Yep.
Is that about it?
New York's certainly up there too,
so
by the way.
let's just dumb Minnesota into the rest of America.
I'm just telling you, it's better. And you know what's also pretty good? The football in Minnesota is pretty good too.
All right, everybody, if you listen to this, Dom is going to be, are you going to be at the Moorhead Sports Center tonight?
I am not actually. I'm avoiding that. Zach is calling the game tonight, but I do live in Moorhead.
Well, okay. Maybe you should think about Izzo's are moving to Mapleton next week. That's a direct shot at the Spud hockey program.
I will.
Direct shot.
My email is always open. My Twitter messages are always open. Feel free. So I would welcome any kind of feedback.
Some guy in Moorhead, of all places, is saying it's no longer the state of hockey.
Sorry, I'm just saying. I'm not saying Moorhead is not good at hockey, and I'm not saying Minnesota's not good at hockey. I just think basketball needs its due. How good it is, because it's really good. And NDSU and South Dakota State are benefiting from it right now.
DIZZO at WDAY.com.
Okay, now can we actually chat about something relevant? What about our guy Veeks?
I thought that was relevant. Good for him. Now, I don't know. He's got a lot of work to do at Montana State.
Yep.
And I think McFeely is right on this in that some people are putting Montana State as a top 5 program. I'm not there yet.
They're with top 10. They're not top 5.
But there's a distance between the JMUs and NDSUs of the world and a Montana State. He's got to get full cost of attendance. Maybe they have partial. I don't know. Now, where are they at the indoor facility?
It's coming. The cost of attendance
are
is
they
also
like
coming
NDSU
too.
on their indoor?
I don't know.
Ready to announce it?
I don't think they're that close.
Okay,
I don't
it's a
follow
ways
it
away.
I don't follow it as closely as I should, but I don't believe they're as close as NDSU is on that front.
And so to really attract the level of recruits, I think that NDSU and JMU has, in a northern climate, in a Rocky Mountain climate, you need an indoor facility, which is really surprising when you think about the University of Montana, which for years was the bell cow of the 1AA division before it became the FCS, and they sort of stayed still.
Right.
They did some addition to the stadium. They built a student academic wellness center or something next to the stadium. I can't remember. It's called the Grizzly Club.
Yeah, that's right.
But they did not build an indoor football facility. And that's still somewhat surprising in that you see these indoor bubbles. You see them at high schools in Texas.
Yeah. We saw
you
it
see
up
them at
close.
high schools down in the Twin Cities.
Yep.
It's not like $37 million that you need. You need a bubble.
I found it interesting. Veeks pointed to the Bison Montana State playoff game as something of a point of reference for him to say that this is a job that if it ever came open, that'd be one I would look at, because by all accounts, you have written about it. I've talked about it. That was the start of the Division I dynasty, was that day in Bozeman when NDSU blitzed them.
It was, and Montana State never recovered until Jeff Schote got there 4 years ago.
Yep.
They never did. They just
no. Rob Ash wanted to.
He
and
touted
couldn't.
like we need. Remember that press conference? He goes, we need to look like these guys. Our linemen need to be like these guys, and we will be like these guys. And they never did.
It did not happen. A lot of Bison fans still are sore about Montana State opting out of coming to the Fargo Dome for that regular season game. What was that, 2011 or 2012? All I remember is a Saturday night at the BSA. We're getting ready to cover a Bison men's basketball game, and Gene Taylor was fit to be tied that night because he had just gotten the phone call that they were opting out of the game here.
Yeah, it really was a low blow. I mean, an FCS opting out of an FCS, and then they had to go to the Grand
Ferris State.
Yep. The Division II team the next year, the following fall. So that was really a low blow by Montana State. It's one thing for maybe an FBS to buy out an FCS.
Yep.
You know, it's not right, but I get it.
Georgia Southern did it the year before when they were supposed to come here.
But for an FCS to leave another FCS team hanging like that for a non-conference game, that was low.
I look at this now for Viggs, that he had a chance to be head coach here twice over.
Yeah, so why now?
And
that's a good question.
That's the interesting part of this, of why now. And I know some of the Wyoming Super Rubes were not thrilled at how the offense had been performing over the last couple of years. And granted, they had, a near NFL MVP caliber quarterback there for 2 years, that were things getting a little stale. And also, and we talked about this on the video blog on Monday, maybe the writing was on the wall that Craig Bohl is not necessarily ready to be done coaching. Because I was always of the mindset, and this was just my thought process, Kolpack, not asking anybody, that Viggs was the man in waiting whenever Craig was going to be done at Wyoming.
And so now I believe that maybe he wasn't the guy in waiting.
Yeah, I think you have to think that. That's or he was told, you need head coaching experience before we can consider you to be the head coach
I
here.
saw an article in the Laramie newspaper when it was announced that he first got the job. It wasn't long, but there was one paragraph that said, Wyoming's offense under Vigen was this and this under Josh Allen. Then it only averaged like 22 points.
Right.
The other, as just say, I'm not sure how long he was for this job. I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of took it that way, that things were trending not in the right direction.
And that's the thing where Viggs, how often did we have that? You saw that on message boards, or how often you got emailed or tweeted about it, especially 2008 to early 11, where Vigen just was raked over the coals.
People love to bitch about the offensive coordinator. It's one of the easiest things to do in Fargo or any football hotbed across America.
Yep.
Tim Polasuk.
Yep.
He sucks.
Yep.
Vigen,
fire him. Yep.
But then all of a sudden playoff victories came and a national title, and he's great.
Right.
He's
well,
great.
that also led to the most bizarre press conference ever after the New Hampshire win, when Bohl went out of his way to thank Vigen, tout Vigen, when all of this was happening where Kleiman wasn't going to Wyoming. It just made a real bizarre scene that day.
Let's not thank the defensive coordinator.
It was really weird.
Who had the nation's best defense that year.
It was really a weird deal. I am curious who he hires for his staff. I know you reached out and talked to Tyler Roll about this, both for Montana State and for Wyoming, and we'll get to Tim Polasek in a second, of what Viggs is going to do with the guy still there. Because he's hired.
He's required to hang on to some of those coaches, which is, I think, it's one of the reasons a couple other guys didn't take that
the job. Is exactly right. Yep.
They didn't have their choice of a full staff.
Yeah, that's the real intriguing part. I don't know if you saw it. I'm looking for contract and amount of money. I have not seen the details on that, because I would think, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, he's probably taking a pay cut to go from Wyoming to Montana State.
$350 at Wyoming was the last reported figure.
And I think his base was $206. Now I know they're going to bump that up for Vigen, but I don't know if they got to that amount. So I am curious on that front.
And that leads you to believe that maybe he didn't. Craig is 62. How long is he going to do this? If he's not guaranteed as a guy in waiting, maybe I need to make my move now.
Yeah, and I think that went a lot into it. Tim Polasek is now joining back up.
Same thing. That's the same situation.
With Craig Bohl.
Tim Polasek. Kirk Ferentz is 65 years old. Tim Polasek is the offensive line coach at Iowa. Maybe he got some inkling that Ferentz isn't going to be there that long. And in the world of Big Ten, if the head coach goes, everybody's
gone. Yep. So now he reunites with his old boss, who hired him out of a lumber factory in Wisconsin.
What a contrast in personalities, going from Vigen to Tim Polasek.
Yeah. And also going from Kirk Ferentz to Craig Bohl. There's a pretty good contrast of personalities there as well. on that front. This is interesting for Polstick. I'm curious because the first 2 years he was offensive coordinator here when he came back with Kleiman, obviously he had Carson Wentz. And I think the sophomore year of Easton Stick, 2016, I think you'll remember the Bison offense didn't necessarily click that year. That was an odd year for the Bison offense where they had fits and starts that entire year. And so I'm curious about this now chance at an FBS school at Wyoming.
Yeah. Well, you learned some things in the Big Ten. I'm sure every year you learn some things, and Tim certainly was involved in game planning with Iowa. I mean, every offensive line coach is a big part of that.
Yep.
They have to know what's going on. So, and how old is he now? I mean, he's been around a while.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know off the top of my head. He's got to be.
And there's something
to
see. There's something about calling the plays and being in charge of that.
Absolutely, no doubt.
However, under Craig, and Tim knows this, that you need to produce.
You got to run the ball too under Craig. That's the way it works. So, well, I can't sit here and say I know Wyoming's offense.
Have they hired an offensive line coach yet?
They just did, I think, yesterday as well, because AJ Blazek left to take the Vanderbilt job, and he had been there 3 weeks. Yeah, I was going to say 3 weeks,
maybe.
Yeah, tops before he goes into the SEC on that front. So interesting to see the coaching tree hires that have happened over the last couple days. On the Bison football front, they get set now. Youngstown, as I mentioned, 10 days away as we tape this. We had a chance yesterday to talk to a couple of the newer defensive guys. They're going to start. Lane Tucker being one, Jayden Price being the other. Speaking of Wyoming, that's where Lane Tucker hails from. And he flat out told me yesterday, said, I was not ready. I was not ready for college football when I got here. I needed 3 years, which is after he redshirted before he's ready to play. He was flat out. I thought that was really eye-opening, Kolpack. He said that. And he started to produce at the end of last year. And that's a spot, as you well know, defensively on the inside, the Bison needs somebody. And maybe it's him.
It's a maturity game on the inside. Yeah. You can't be fresh out of high school if you're not ready for it. And especially, I think it's almost more mentally than physically. I mean, physically, he came pretty well built. If I remember, he was 6'4".
He's a big guy.
240, I think, out of high school, 230, something like that. What is he, 270, I'm sure?
Yeah, he's up there now. So I'm curious about how he'll perform. But he was really open about the transition from high school to college and saying, I'm just flat out not ready. He's 278 right now, by the way. So,
well, he's telling the truth, and the same could be said for a lot of players, even though they may not want to admit it. But it's the Bison defensive line has always, and that's a key. You got to be good in the middle, and we've always said that. O-line, D-line, you need to be good up front. It's the hardest position to recruit in the FCS, I think, having good defensive linemen. You look at NDSU, Costner Ching was a tight end.
Right.
We converted him. Matt Biegler, although not there anymore, was a tight end.
Right, exactly. I know you did a story earlier this week when you were visiting with Tyler Roll about the running backs and how many are going to get reps during a game.
Well, everybody, I would think.
That. Yeah.
I would think, do they go down even, is Nathan Goldaddy going to get some shots this year?
Yeah, I wonder on that. Tyler said not 10, but probably up to 15 would probably be a reasonable
18
amount.
18 to 22 would be the top end, somewhere in the teens, which maybe that might be a little much for my taste right now. We'll see. Depends how a game goes, but Seth Wilson, once he gets to 10 carries, do you start divvying it up a little bit?
I don't know. If he's the hot hand, it's hard to take him off the field. That's the whole thing in the running backs, that if he's getting 5-6 yards of a pop, you're not going to take him out of the game, are you?
That's going to be something to watch all spring. Is how long do you go with your veterans? How many plays, how many reps do you go with your veterans on a daily or on a game-by-game basis? Yeah,
that's intriguing to me. But also, and Tyler said this during the media availability on Tuesday, they really like the younger guys there. Ganella and Marshall are going to see the field and play quite a bit, so that might give you maybe an added bonus. Say, okay, we can rest Kobe. Jalen Bussey's only played one game. He's ready to explode in this spring season.
And DJ Stewart measure up to his recruiting profile coming out of Wisconsin. He was rather highly recruited.
Kimberly, the Papermakers, which is one of the most successful high school programs in the country. I mean, they won 7 titles in a row. They never lost a game. You're exactly right. He was a high-profile guy when he came out of high school and has yet to really see it now as a junior. I'm curious if that's going to come around.
4th year in the program now?
Yeah, correct. And he switched spots. Remember, he went to wide receiver for a little bit, now back to running back. So I am really curious on that front.
It's quite an adjustment. Yet you have to have a different body type going to running back. Making the transition down from wide receiver to running back, it's a hard thing to do. You look at Dimitri Williams, when he went from wide receiver to running back, he had to change his body. So maybe with DJ Stewart, when you go from receiver to running back, you got to change some things. You got to be a little more physical. You probably lift different. You probably do some workouts different. So that takes time.
Gosh, remember when we saw Dimitri at Spring Ball 2019? This is now 2 years ago. We didn't recognize him. He had bulked up that much to make the transition, and come fall camp, he was ready to go, and he provided another able body back there that the Bison are going to be without this year. So you're right. I'm curious on how long that's going to take.
But if you're going to produce, now's the time.
Yeah.
Now's the time for DJ.
That this is the fourth year in, so we'll see on that front. The news came out yesterday. South Dakota will not play Western Illinois when it's normal scheduled time, which is going to be next Friday. Western has COVID issues. Just checking in this morning on my show in Macomb. They believe they'll be ready to go for next week for the game against Missouri State. This is why the league put in that buffer, but it's a reminder, I think, for fans that this is going to happen, Kolpack. It's just a matter of when, not if, in my mind.
Correct. The unexpected will be the expected this spring. The FBS got through the season, but it had issues on a weekly basis. I would expect the same with the FCS. I think Patty Viverito was correct in scheduling. Let's start with 8 games. If you get 6 in, then you're on par with the rest of the leagues who are starting at 6. They may end up with 4.
Alcorn opted out. That's the 33rd school to do it. As now, here as we sit,
man, it's getting late.
It's late, isn't it? Now, I mean, we're on the 11th of February, and we're probably not done. I bet you there's probably a couple more that are still. Here's the real thing: I think teams that start and play a couple and then do it, that's a bad look. Either you're in or you're out, in my mind, and I think that may happen too.
Go back to what we're talking about: Montana State pulling out of the NDSU non-conference game. If you had any inkling that you're not going to do it, make the decision.
Just don't.
In January,
I agree.
December.
Couple other scheduling notes. NDSU announced that Maine is coming out of the schedule for 2023. The Black Bears will come to Fargo, getting $250,000 for that date. Ironic that Maine was supposed to come here way back in 2001, and that game was canceled after the 9/11 terrorist attack.
It would have been. I think NDSU would have gave them a good game then. Bison were coming off a pretty big year in 2000. Had Lamar Gordon. They had some beef to their line. Looked like, at least physically, they looked like they could probably compete.
That was the first 1AA team that was the Bison, because obviously they were still Division II.
And they were going to come here.
Yeah, they were coming to Fargo. So that actually will happen now in 2023. The Bison have 2 games for that year. I know McFeely wrote about this, and you tweeted about it as well, that there's still a date open that first Saturday in September, and you're thinking Twin Cities?
St. Thomas.
U.S. Bank Stadium, huh?
An NDSU home game, you give St. Thomas a guarantee. You probably maybe draw 40,000 plus.
I think you get probably 50.
Maybe.
I think you get 30,000 Bison fans, like we saw at Target Field. St. Thomas will bring people. I think they get 15 to 20,000 fans, just from what we've seen from their experience at Target Field when they
and
went.
Maybe just college football fans in the city's going, this is an interesting
fans
game.
Just drive them crazy if the Bison got that many fans to U.S. Bank Stadium for a game like that. The FBS options are slim at this point, Kolpack. I think that destination game, I asked Todd Phelps about it, and that's something they're, after the success of Target Field, that's something they certainly want to do again if they can't get an FBS game.
And who knows what NDSU would get for a gate? 600, 800,000, maybe more?
Yeah, I mean, they
got 600 at
they were
Target?
guaranteed up to that, and then beyond whatever that the concessions and whatever and merchandise they were set to get. So they were probably near a mill.
So that's
out of
that's
that
pretty
game.
Good,
right? If you can't get an FBS game, that would
it almost makes
make up
it
for that.
Like they need to make that a priority.
Yeah, I would say that becomes something, because FBS are just not going to happen. If it's not been signed by now for 2023,
not 23, no,
it's not gonna happen by then. I don't imagine that on that front. So I'm curious to see if that becomes an announcement. Probably not, maybe in the not so distant future, about that happening down in Minneapolis. Bison basketball off this weekend and set for Boy,
comes down to this.
The season really begins next weekend with South Dakota State coming to town.
I'm curious to see how really South Dakota State has been the team most interrupted by COVID issues.
No doubt.
What are they at, 6 games now?
The men have played 6. Yep.
The Bison have not missed a game.
No,
it's really been a stroke of luck.
All 12 games.
It's unbelievable.
You're exactly right. I was surprised that the South Dakota State women swept USD. I thought that was going to be a split, but the Jackrabbit women swept South Dakota in Brookings, I know, last weekend.
Yeah, USD women started off the season as, I think, the team, and they were nationally ranked and played South Carolina tough,
Right,
the number one team at the time.
South Dakota State has taken now over as the team now, I think, this year on the women's basketball front.
I haven't really looked into both those teams very much, but it makes you wonder what happened to South Dakota, or South Dakota State that better, much better. Where do the Bison women stack?
That's what I was going to lead off or end this conversation with. We've talked about how great a renaissance it's been for Jory Collins' team, but the rubber will hit the road really next weekend to see how good they are.
What would be a good weekend? Just hanging in there? Is that a good weekend?
Well, he would not obviously say that.
No.
What would be a good weekend?
Well, certainly a split would be
That would be a huge weekend.
Huge weekend.
Good weekend are 2 close losses. South Dakota State, and you know this, has been able to set the score against the Bison for the last decade. If we want to win by 40, we're going to do it. If we want to win by 10, we're going to do that. They've been able to do that for the last decade.
I'm curious more to see how they measure up athletically more than anything.
Yep.
Strength, speed. Are they outclassed, bringing the ball up court?
Yep.
Can they break the press if South Dakota State puts on them? How do they measure up just in those 2 factors? Because they have been brutally
outclassed on every stretch.
Especially speed and athleticism, just not even in the same
Defense.
ballpark.
I mean, there are certain games I can remember during the Carolyn Dehoff era where we would look at each other that South Dakota State could do anything they wanted
just went right
in the
by
paint.
Right?
I mean, they just could do anything. And that obviously has not been a trend with Jory Collins' team, but that's still, we haven't seen it. And that's why I'm really interested to see how that's going to play out next weekend on that front.
So NDSU, the Shack, they're allowing 2,800 fans. Do they get that?
South Dakota State last year was the biggest crowd of the season on the men's side.
It was 1,500 against Oral Roberts, which is pretty good. And the crowd made a difference late in the game, even though the Bison lost.
I think maybe 2.
Yeah.
Maybe. Of course, this is the problem on this is that football starts next week. You know what I mean? This is the biggest week.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
You know,
you're right.
It's
the
biggest. It's the biggest weekend of the year for basketball.
That's a lot of money.
And that's why. And you know what I mean? Basketball can't get any headway because bam, here comes football right in the biggest week of the year for basketball.
Hey, you take a family of 4 to basketball. What is it? $20 a ticket? Something like that.
It's up there.
Football is certainly more.
I don't know. That will certainly be a factor, I think, next week on that front. But it's going to be fun to follow over the next couple weeks.
You know what they need to do, Dom? They need to just open up beer sales to the entire arena. It's not been a factor.
Well, that started last year, right?
Yeah.
When it began.
The games are what, hour and 45 minutes?
Yeah, about that.
You close beer sales at 10 minutes left in the game.
I was going to say halftime of the men's game, maybe.
Yeah, it's never going to be an issue. Instead of everybody sitting on the top, standing on the top row, just
Do you think that happens? Do you think that's a matter of time before that happens?
I would think so. UND hockey has no real issues that we know of.
I would think there was probably as budgets are getting tighter and income is getting smaller. That's probably certainly an option that they're going to have to go down.
I mean, the students are on the end there. They're separate from the rest of the arena. I just don't think it's a big deal. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out going forward. All right. This is the last real calm weekend.
Stay warm, my friend.
Enjoy this because it's going to ramp up for the next 3.5 months probably.
I wonder, and I'm writing a column on this, I wonder what the Kansas City soccer team, those players, when they step off the bus today.
Oh, holy cow. Because they were supposed to host the Bison.
Yeah, it got switched because of weather from Kansas City of all places.
So the high is supposed to be, I think, -10 on Saturday,
Yeah.
and they're playing in the bubble because obviously the soccer season begins this weekend in the Summit League. So
I have 3 pieces of advice for the Kansas City players. Don't talk about the cold. It just makes you colder. Turn it into a badge of honor.
Yep.
Put a cup of water in the microwave oven, boil it, Step outside and watch it evaporate. Get some extra credit from your science professor.
Number 3.
The indoor bubble is no warm oasis. We've
No,
been
it
there.
is not.
We've been there. We have had full gear on talking to Easton Stick.
Yes, I've been in there with full coat, hat, gloves, the whole thing. Yeah. So it's not necessarily.
So don't be wearing shorts and a T-shirt in the bubble. It's giving heart state, Dom. I'm
good
offering
advice. That's good advice there. Good job on that.
And speaking of, let's end it. Give people.
Absolutely.
It's a big day.
Lendahandup.org and find whatever charitable donation you want.
I've already made
to.
mine.
Good for you. That's good stuff on that. That'll wrap up this edition of the Kolpack and Izzo podcast. We will be with you each week throughout the football season, which looks like it's never going to end between now and next December. We'll be with you here. You can find all of our podcasts at Inforum.com, Google Play, or Apple iTunes. You can search Kolpack and Izzo. Jeffrey, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. And thanks, everybody, for listening to the Kolpack and Izzo podcast, brought to you by Gate City Bank.